Welcome back to the channel, SD fans. Wrecks are a massive diver favourite, and exploring a lump of rusting metal is a highlight for many, including myself. I'm a dedicated wreckhead, and I like nothing more than ferreting around in a shipwreck. But does it matter if it's a genuine wreck or an artificial reef? In this video, I'll be looking at real shipwrecks and man-made scuttled ones, and why so many places are sinking ships, airplanes and even military vehicles as marine habitats and diver attractions. Let's dive into the video. I love wrecks. They've been my passion since I first started out in diving, and they've held a curious fascination for me ever since. I still haven't quite got my head around how bizarre it is. If an old cargo ship was moored up in a harbour somewhere and you were given the chance to wander around inside the engine room, you would probably politely decline the offer. But when that self-same vessel is lying in 30 odd metres of water, you've got divers lining up to penetrate into the engine room and superstructure. I've been asked many times what the lure of shipwrecks is. Still can't put my finger on it. It's just a lust for rust. Now, I'm such a wreckhead that I love any sunken metal, be it the victim of a wartime incident, a maritime accident, or an artificial reef sunk specifically for divers. But there are those out there who dismiss purpose sunk artifacts out of hand. It's not a proper wreck is something I've heard many times over the years. But what constitutes a proper wreck? Why should a cargo ship that went down in a storm, for instance, be viewed any differently to a freighter specifically sent to the bottom for divers? They're both ships, they can both be extensively explored, and they'll both form the basis for a healthy marine ecosystem once they are colonised. So why the negativity towards artificial reefs? They are too sterile, is one explanation I've been given. When pressed for more details, this usually relates to the fact that artificial reefs will have been extensively cleaned and prepared prior to being stunk, both to protect the marine environment and also to make them as safe as possible for visiting divers. The latter generally involves cutting entry and exit holes in the hull, removing or securing doors and hatches, removing any snag hazards such as hanging wires and so on. Now, to me, this doesn't detract from a shipwreck in any way, shape or form. It's still an enjoyable dive. It's just made as safe as possible. Though it is important to remember that any wreck, genuine or man-made, still represents a serious endeavour if you're planning to penetrate inside. And it is still possible to get into serious difficulties even in a prepared artificial reef. People can get very complacent on purpose-sunk wrecks with fatal results. You only need to look at the number of deaths on some of the more high-profile artificial reefs out there, such as the gigantic Spiegel Grove and the Hoyt S. Vandenberg in the Florida Keys. The key thing here is do not venture inside a wreck unless you are suitably trained, regardless of whether it's a purpose sunk or a genuine wreck. You're still in an overhead environment with all of the associated hazards. Once a vessel's been on the seabed for a few years, it will undoubtedly suffer from the effects of being submerged in salt water, and also the destructive power of nature. The Keith Tibbets in Cayman Brac has been torn in two, as has the Umelfa Rood in Malta, and the aforementioned Spiegel Grove was tilted from being on its side to almost upright by huge swells from a hurricane. Plus, once encrusted marine growth, corals and sponges get a solid hold on a wreck, it's hard to differentiate between something put down on purpose and something which sank by accident. When I first dived the Spiegel Grove, yes, I keep mentioning this wreck, but it is one of the largest artificial reefs in the world. It was a glistening white, but the last time I dived it, a few years ago, it was smothered in marine growth, literally to the point you could barely make out the railings, they were that encrusted. I can kind of see the argument relating to the removal of equipment, leaving just endless empty rooms, but many artificial reefs are not like that anymore. Purpose-sunk vessels are now being sent to the bottom with some of their original equipment still in situ, to give divers something to look at rather than the bare rooms. The Kitty Wake in the Cayman Islands still has recompression chambers inside, for instance, and the massive Oriskany aircraft carrier the largest artificial reef in the world that sunk off the coast of Pensacola in Florida, has got control panels and dials and switches. The patrol boat Tyrrell Bay in Grenada has much of its inner workings intact, including the telephone, compass binnacle, and much more. Another argument I've heard against artificial reefs is that it is just more man-made junk littering up the oceans. However, I think you have to look at them in context. Wrecks to be scuttled have to be rigorously cleaned of contaminants before they're sent to the bottom of the sea. And they are generally sunk in a place that has few fish and little coral growth. The whole idea of artificial reefs in many locations is to take the pressure off the actual coral reefs and rocky reefs by giving divers an entirely new dive site. Plus, once colonisation has taken place, the purpose-sunk attraction becomes an inhabited reef as well. Genuine wrecks around the world are not just shipwrecks. You can dive on aeroplanes and so on as well. And that's also the case with artificial reefs. In the Bahamas, you've got the remnant of a Cessna aircraft that was sunk as a prop for one of the rubbish Jaws sequels, as well as a twisted framework of scaffolding poles that was once in the shape of a Vulcan bomber from a James Bond movie. However, the undoubted leader when it comes to sinking odd things in the water is Jordan. Here you'll find a Hercules C130 aircraft, or more rightly, the broken remains of one after a winter storm ravaged it, along with a TriStar airliner complete with all its rows of seats and a fully equipped cockpit. But perhaps the most unusual dive site in Jordan's Red Sea waters is the Military Museum, which comprises a veritable convoy of military vehicles on the sandy seabed between two coral reefs. Between 20 and 30 metres in depth, you'll find armoured cars, light tanks, heavy tanks, field guns, even attack helicopters. It really is an incredible sight, and marine life was already moving in to claim its spot within a few weeks of them being down. The great thing about wrecks, either genuine maritime mishaps, wartime casualties, or artificial reefs, is that they have something for everyone. If you don't want to ferret around inside, you don't have to. If you aren't really a fan of rusted metal in the first place, no worries. There'll be plentiful range of marine life living on and around a wreck site to keep you occupied. So, what's your take on artificial reefs? And what are some of your favourite wreck dives? Leave your comments below, and if you've got a question, fire away. We can't answer it, maybe someone in our growing community will be able to. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and like our YouTube channel, and check out our ever-growing playlist for more educational and inspirational videos. As always, stay safe, and if you're going diving, on a wreck or not, enjoy.